Hello, everyone. Hello again. It's super nice to have all of you join us on our webinar titled From DRHP to IPO. The agenda for today is to discuss the relevance of sustainability in this process, right? Questions like why you should do it altogether, and if yes, what is the step-by-step process of implementing ESG into the entire DRHP to IPO process. I'll tell you a little bit about why we decided to conduct this webinar, and this is actually a very unique one for us. We typically, we usually do a lot of webinars. Our marketing team, which is handled by Rasadul, tends to do one webinar every month. But those are open to the public. Anyone and everyone is invited to join in and contribute and participate. We wanted to conduct this one in a very closed door setting, only for a few folks for whom this topic is extremely relevant, right? So that we can just have conversations directed to our particular use case. So I'll tell you a little bit more about the company as well. We are Oren. We're an end-to-end sustainability company, right? There are two key pillars to our business. One is that we have a tech platform, which we call the Oren Sustainability Hub. And companies use this to do their greenhouse gas emissions accounting, handle any kind of sustainability data, do sustainability reporting, and also we also do a lot of work in value chain sustainability, and we offer a ton of sustainability related consulting and advisory services as well, right? And one of them being supporting companies through their sustainability integrations as they traverse the path of getting listed. Today we have two incredible people on our panel for this discussion. We have Abhirup Das. Abhirup Das is the head of sustainability at Oren. He leads operations, any kind of client delivery, and leads all kind of ESG related work at the company. He has a team of project managers, sustainability consultants, and customer success folks. He has deep experience in sustainability and has led decarbonization initiatives for us, and even in his past life, done so for a major petroleum corporation in India. He also serves as the ESG advisor to the Gujarat Chamber of Commerce and Industry, where he supports organizations across sectors in strengthening their ESG and compliance maturity. He's an I'm Ahmedabad alumni, and yes, I think he's a big backbone for us at the company. We also have Rajesh Dhaya with us. He's a seasoned banking and general management professional with 30 plus years of leadership experience across Axis Bank and the Tata Group. He is widely recognized for his expertise in corporate governance, HR development, risk management, regulatory compliance, and ESG strategy. He currently sits on the board of multiple large organizations such as Max Life Insurance, Bluestone Jewelry, Caliber Chemicals, and Quanta People. In addition to that, he also sits on the board of multiple social impact organizations. At Oren, he is our Chief Governance Officer, and he leads critical ESG transformation and governance projects for us. We're really excited to have both of you join us today. Awesome. Thank you so much. So without much further ado, I'll pass it on to Abhirup and let's see what he has in store for us.
Thank you, Arushi. And very good evening to everyone who has joined. So as Arushi already mentioned that this is much more focused towards people or maybe like the organizations who are right now in the pathway to kind of get listed or through the IPO process. That's why we are focusing or we are going to dedicate this next 1 hour, 45 minutes to answer any queries that you have. And also I'll try to describe or maybe like take you through that process of what essentially ESG means, or maybe what is sustainability, how it is relevant for any company who is, let's say, a company going to get listed, or maybe like for a larger corporate also, who how it matters, right? So that is what I'm going to cover. Post that I can also talk about, and I'll show that exactly what it takes for any organization to get started with their sustainability journey, what will be the starting step, and like for any company who is going through that IPO process, what are the pre-DRHP tasks to be done, and post-listing, what are the things that has to be taken care of, right? So that is what is the essential part of the webinar today. So yeah, like I'll start with the basic definition of sustainability, or what we call it, Oren, or maybe like in investor terms, or maybe like a global term, which is environment, social, and governance, which stands for ESG, right? So if I have to summarize ESG in a single line, or maybe like a one line understanding of ESG, ESG is nothing but a set of standards or maybe guidelines which a company follows, and that is mainly to showcase or show that how responsibly and transparently a company operates, managing its environmental and social risks, ensuring good governance, and demonstrating readiness for a long-term compliant and sustainable uh, company or an organization, which is anyway desirable by any investor, any regulator, any other stakeholders that we are looking for, right? So that's where ESG becomes like much more important on core for any company who is going through this journey of IPO, right? I'm not going to dwell deeper into all of these topics, and under environment, what are the things that should be covered, and social and governance, because that is a larger topic and that would need much more fine tuning to an organization and the type of industry and everything. So yeah, like for that, we can have you can have a one-to-one discussion on that, right? Now, talking about sustainability and ESG, like why does it matter today and why it is important today? Like from a listing process viewpoint, anyway, it is, I would say, a regulatory requirement as well, but at the same time, it is something that is required for any company who is not even, let's say, in the top 1,000, top 2,000 companies which are in the listed category. Right. So first of all, from an access to finance viewpoint, so regulators like RBI and even like banks in India as well as global banks, they do have their own internal mandates as well as their own mechanisms or philosophies that we do want to have a certain set of companies in our portfolio, certain type of companies, and they're anyway kind of hedging their risks in terms of investing into companies and all, right? So that's where, from an access to finance viewpoint, either emissions, climate change, climate risk, all of these things comes into the picture, while any BFSI sector company or many banks are taking a decision that shall we go and be a part of this company or not, right? Similarly goes for insurance. Like today, all of us are in India. We do know the situation in Delhi. We do know how monsoons has been in this year, right? So all of these things are nothing but basically the repercussions or maybe like the effects of climate change, right? So that is anyway impacting each and every company, each and every person on a day-to-day basis, right? Like from our food and agri products to maybe like your retails, your transportation sector, to your, let's say, like aviation industry, everyone is getting impacted by sudden impact on the rain patterns, heat waves, and all of these things. And that's where insurance companies comes into a picture, that for our risk premiums or for our insurance premiums, they do factor in these risks based on your factory or your company's operations, your company's like value chain partners, your suppliers, geography, and the type of business that you have. So that's where you would see more and more impact on your insurance premium because of such factors like your environmental factors, social factors, and governance factors. And that's where it becomes a very much important point for you. Similarly, like stakeholder or investors, like right as I mentioned, investors do want to be a part of a company who is thinking long term, and they are also managing their risks in a better way, and they're also uh, in a better position compared to any other competitor, any other company in the same sector, which are on the public markets, right? So that's where, for an investor, for a company who is going to get an go for an IPO, showing that yeah, like we are better prepared to manage our risk and we are here for a long-term viewpoint, that really matters, and that's where sustainability and ESG risk management comes into the central key point, right? Apart from these major segments, like from a BFSI to a shareholder's viewpoint, like I touched upon earlier, regulatory requirements is also a key point here. I'll definitely touch upon that how Indian regulations are right now. But then, yeah, like if you look at SEBI, SEBI do mandate a certain set of companies to go for sustainability or ESG disclosures. I'll touch upon that in the later slides. Similarly, societal trends today, like post-COVID era has been different for any corporate in terms of an employer. So like all the employees and even suppliers, vendors, everyone's expectations are different in a way that how the company should manage and what are the key benefits, key like terms and conditions that they want in terms of employment, right? So that's why societal trends are also changing, and as we are moving towards a newer generation, newer age group, their requirements and their type of needs and expectations from a corporate or a client, from an employer is also different, and that's where sustainability and ESG also comes as a key player there. And finally, the business supply chain. So in the last couple of years, we had seen multiple geopolitical scenarios, multiple supply chain disruptions because of either trade disruptions or maybe like some or the other things coming into picture. And that's where the reliance on a global value chain is at a higher risk today. And that's where like even not only the geographical presence or geographical location of your supplier matters, but also how the company operates in that certain geography also matters to any like up the chain company, right? So if you have a value chain partner or a supplier who is present at certain geography, or maybe like they don't have a ethical business conduct, that is going to impact your business as well. So that's where the value chain engagement or value chain risk management is also coming up as a key point for your entire business continuity plan, right? So all of these combined together, if I have to connect the dots again with the first slide that I talked about, ESG is nothing but a set of standards and rules and regulation what a company follows to hedge their risk or manage their risk in a better way. And that's where ESG comes into picture. That ESG is nothing but a central like framework or a central process which helps you understand, identify your risks, and then manage those risks in a better way, right? And what are the outcome that you get out of it? Obviously, an investor appeal, like I already mentioned, that yeah, investors do want to be a part of the companies who are managing their risks better. They do have a long-term oversight, and then they do know all the things, and then they have things under control. Similarly, from a regulatory compliance, I'll now come about that. So SEBI mandates all the listed companies to do have some kind of a voluntary ESG or systematic reporting, but then there is a mandate for certain type or certain segment of the companies. So that is like today, if you see at the regulatory landscape, that has been changing since 2020 or 2021, right? So SEBI came up with a new regulation in 2020 along with MCA. So they call it BRSR, which stands for Business Responsibility and Sustainability Reporting. So it is nothing but just a framework, or maybe like you can call it as a question paper, where there are a set of questions on that every company has to answer those questions in a format that is prescribed by SEBI, right? So it is essentially just a report format on which every company has to publish their performance and make it public for everyone, right? So in August 2020, BRSR got released. And from FY 21-22, it was applicable to the top 1,000 listed companies by market cap, right? So the first time any company who started using the framework or BRSR would be maybe, like in 2021, 2022, when it was voluntary. But from FY 22-23, it became mandatory for all the companies to do reporting on BRSR, mainly the top 1,000 companies. Now, from 2021 till 2025 today, SEBI has already amended this regulation or the guideline or the framework that you can call it as BRSR twice. So today we are at BRSR 3.0. So already there have been multiple changes going on because of multiple like regulatory changes, global requirements from a sustainability lens, and then multiple KPIs and goals that needs to be tracked on a transparency yardstick, right? So that is what is happening today. And SEBI has been active in terms of addressing any queries, addressing any kind of challenges that the industry is facing, and that's where this amendments comes into picture. Now, what it started in 2020 or 2021 was more or less a voluntary exercise, and that's where it was like toned at a phase that yeah, like you have to report these indicators. There are like optional indicators also for any company to kind of report those KPIs and all. But if you look at the long-term trend, like what has happened now is that SEBI now wants to promote this regulation or maybe like this framework equivalent to your financial reporting, which essentially says like in for your financial reporting, as you need a third party auditor to audit your financial performance, and that goes to be public. Similarly, for your non-financial indicators, which are environment, social, and governance indicators, SEBI is now mandating companies to also have the similar approach, get it verified or audited by a third party, and that audit statement or assurance statement is something that we have to attach with the report that we are publishing. So you can think of it that way, like, yeah, it's in the transition phase right now. In next couple of years, all the companies who are reporting in BRSR, they have to have the similar approach or similar mindset about financial and non-financial reporting, because all these data points are valuable to investors and other stakeholders, right? Now, for this financial year, FY 25-26, if their new company goes through an IPO and then they fall into the top 500 as per the market cap, right? So automatically this assurance of the BRSR or non-financial indicators gets applicable to them. So from next year onwards, it will be applicable to all the top 1,000 companies. So there is a glide path that they have given for FY 25-26. The top 500 companies as per market cap have to go for an external assurance or audit. And next year it will be top 1,000 companies. Over and above that, if you look at the recent change that has happened in the last year, and even last year, SEBI introduced one more thing, which is the value chain disclosure. So like I was talking about the importance of why sustainability is not only limited to companies' operation and companies' boundary. It is also the value chain partners, the supply chain partners, as well as your customers, who are also part of the same ecosystem. That's where SEBI has now made it mandatory for, again, like there is a glide path that top 250 companies as per market cap, they have to go for assessing their value chain partners, which essentially says your suppliers as well as your customers, who accounts to more than 2% of your total spend or maybe 2% of your total revenue. So for those companies who are part of your ecosystem or value chain partners, your organization have to collect the data, get that data concised into your BRSR format as per the attributable parameters. I'm not going into the nitty-gritties of how the attribution works and all. We'll definitely talk about that later. But yeah, like essentially you need to collect the data and like assess your value chain partners on the same environmental, social, and governance risk parameters, consolidate that into your report, and then publish that report. And this entire data also, like which you're collecting from your value chain partners, also needs to be thoroughly scrutinized by a third party, and then audited report has to be published on the on your website or to the regulators, right? So essentially, what I'm trying to get into by this slide is that the regulation is changing, which started with just a voluntary exercise, now has moved towards a financial accounting, like as equivalent to your financial accounting or financial disclosures. And that is what is going to be the tone of how things are changing. And it is not only in India, but globally also. If you look at European regulations or maybe other Southeast Asian geographies, you can see the similar pattern, a similar approach. Every country is coming up with their own regulation, their own standards, and then kind of entire glide path that by so and so date, these many companies, this type of companies have to go for certain disclosures and all. And then otherwise, voluntary disclosures are anyway part of the ecosystem. Like I mentioned about RBI coming up with this same resolution. Similarly, global banks, they do have separate products like a sustainable linked loans or a green loan or something like that. To avail those kind of products for your banks, you have to have some kind of a commitment, some kind of a target, some kind of regulation, disclosures on environment, social, and governance, right? Now, I would like to take 2 minutes, like explaining about the structure of BRSR, because we're talking about India. So I'm just focusing on what Indian standard look like, what is BRSR, and how you should read about it. So if I have to talk about SEBI's framework, which is BRSR, as I mentioned already, this is basically compartmentalized into three broader sections, which is section A, B, and C, right? So section A is nothing but general disclosure of a company, which is only talking about basic details of the company, that when it was incorporated, what is the market cap, who are the directors, what will be that sorry, the details about the company, where it is registered, what are the head office and all details. So it is just a basic general description or general uh, definition or general information about the company that is being captured in section A. And this is something that is mandatory for any company or anyone who is reporting as per the BRSR framework, right? Similarly, section B is nothing but a uh, entire section dedicated to processes and policies of an organization, which essentially means that from a corporate governance viewpoint, how a company or how the board is ensuring that the policies are uh, aligned to the global requirements or international best practices, and at the same time meeting the requirements that are needed for your risk management, or maybe like risk management or risk register that you have, right? So that's where management process and disclosure, the section B, is talking about, do you have policies for certain things like your environmental parameters, social ethics, corporate governance, then corruption, child labor, so different topics altogether. Or do you have a policy? How frequently do you review it? Who is the reviewing authority? Then any kind of goals, targets that you have, what are the achievements that you have done in these areas and all. So this is just in a nutshell showing about how your company is governing all of these implementation on environmental social risk management framework, right? And the third section, which is the section C, this section is again further divided into uh, 9 subsections which are aligned to the NGRBC principles that we have. So each and every section is aligned to one of the NGRBC principles. And here, BRSR gives us a flexibility that under each and every principle or 9 subsections, we have certain questions or certain KPIs or data points which are mandatory for every company to report, and some things are optional. So they have termed it as essential indicators and leadership indicators. So all the essential indicators or all the essential KPIs are something that are mandatory for any company who is using a BRSR framework for their sustainability or ESG reporting. They have to go and report on these indicators. But for the leadership indicators, it's an optional. If the company has data and they are readily available for them to publish, in that case, they can choose to publish that. If they don't have that data, they can take that approach to kind of make sure that all the data is accurate and then and only then make it public, right? So that is the flexibility that BRSR gives us today, that yeah, we do have section A and B, which is mandatory for everyone. In section C, only the essential indicators are important, right? Now, um, as I mentioned that BRSR has gone through multiple iterations, and today we are sitting with BRSR 3.0, the third version. There is also a term I'm sure like you would have heard about it, which is called a BRSR core. So BRSR core is nothing but like it's not a separate framework or a separate set of questions. It is the same framework that we have, like the section A, B, and C. Out of that, there are only 9 KPIs which are called as BRSR core. So essentially, what BRSR core means is that for any company who is going for, let's say, a third party audit or insurance, you just need to get this assured for these 9 indicators. You can definitely choose to go for a complete assurance for the entire data or entire report, but then bare minimum requirement is these 9 indicators or KPIs. And those 9 indicators are tagged as BRSR core. So that is a key important point, because like as I mentioned, you also have to get the assurance for your value chain partners data as well, and that's where BRSR core comes into picture, that it is only those essential 9 indicators which SEBI or any regulator or any stakeholder understands or like feels that is most important parameter for them, and those indicators are tagged as BRSR core in the framework, right? Now to just give you a view of how the data that we need to publish in BRSR is scattered or is collected from an organization. So essentially here, what you can see is that these circles denominate that what is the size or the extent of the number of data points or KPIs comes from different departments or functions that we have in the organization. And then what will be the overarching like person or committee who is looking after it. So you can see on the top, there is ESG committee, which is basically or essentially the board or the board committee who is going to be responsible for all the data points that we are disclosing on the public domain for a listed company. And that's where they become like the like leaders or maybe like the front runners with the entire disclosure KPIs. Under that, they took after the governance KPIs mainly. Under that, as we are talking about these 9 sections or subsections in section C, right? So here, what we have done, if you look at HR, the circle with HR, right? There is 26/5, which essentially says 26 KPIs are essential KPIs, which are coming from HR as a function. And there are 5 KPIs, which are optional KPIs or leadership KPIs that are also tagged to HR department. So if you look at this entire cloud, you can see legal, operations, and HR play a very important role because they have maximum KPIs ownership. Whereas you can also see that it's not only a single function or single department's job, it is a combined job of all the departments coming together to kind of create the BRSR, right? Because you need inputs and you need like ownership from all the departments because they do own some part or some KPIs individually, and there will be definitely overlapping between different functions and different like groups together for multiple KPIs that we have in PRSR. So right, so this is just a like view of how like what will be the extent of data that we need to collect and that we need to report if we are going for sustainability and ESG disclosure and BRSR before an IPO or maybe like post listing also, right? Um, yes, Arushi, I'll be.
Yeah. Thank you so
Yeah.
much, Abhirup. Before we move on, I'd like to take a pause. Does any one of you have any questions or thoughts on what Abhirup just mentioned? Yeah, please feel free to throw it in into the chat. I think as you go through everything that we're talking about, any question that comes up, please feel free to throw it in the chat so that one of us can pick it up. Rasidul from our team has his eyes keenly looking at the chat box. So yeah, all your questions will be answered. Right. But again, before I move into the ESG integration process, I'd also like to invite Rajesh for you to step in and talk a little bit about your experience and what you are seeing out there in the market. And again, after that, maybe we can get into the more implementation side of things.
Given in the gist of the entire topic in a very structured manner. What I can share is the real life stories of what's happening in India, what's happening in the IPO space, and how different industries, different companies, and different managements are tackling with this opportunity, as I call it. Lots of people initially, as Abhirup rightly mentioned, early 2020, 21, in middle of COVID, people were struggling with the structured data gathering. But today, with IT support and with AI support, lots of information is now getting collated in a very structured manner, and that's pushing everyone to go a step above every year. And parallelly, the regulator is also learning from the companies and demanding more and more. So I think this is the most appropriate time to have this conversation. If I speak from India's perspective, uh, last couple of years have been the years of largest number of IPOs that came into market. I'm not talking about the amount that the capital that was raised, but in terms of visual, if you pick up last 52 weeks eco times, the first page always will be a IPO prospectus. So that's the times we are living in, and hence it becomes very important to think about how do we stay ahead in our journey from starting DRHP to hitting the IPO with the investors. Uh, However, the moment we speak about the evolved desires of investors in terms of seeking data, they are moving beyond financials, they are moving beyond balance sheets, and they are more and more now asking about long term sustainability. The word that was used earlier was risk management, is slowly getting replaced by sustainability. And that's again, I'm saying the reason that it's important for us today who are looking from IPO point of view, but I think it's important for the entire journey of a organization as it evolves from a startup to a listed company to a large company. who is it important for? Is the question people keep on asking. As if I'm a founder, I'll ask the question that whom am I spending these resources for? So the top of while people start from regulatory requirement, but in reality, it is your own commitment to sustainable business practices which can deal with the vagaries of environment. Uh, Abhiru mentioned about climate, which we used to only think in terms of 4 seasons. Today is deciding whether my kid will go to school today or not because daily there is smog. Or there will be, and similarly on macro level, tariffs coming from US decides whether I stay in the business or I move out of the business. So that's the first reason that we should choose to walk the path of sustainability and sustainability reporting. And beyond that, there is also, as rightly mentioned, I won't repeat that, banks are critically looking at because they are getting data ready-made in terms of risk of a company. The employees at large want to work with companies which are conscious to social needs, to public needs, to larger needs of the society and the country and the world and the planet. So that's why I think it's important for all of us, but especially for the companies who are walking now the journey of IPO to start building self commitment within the company and have the confidence to tell the story out there in the world in a very transparent manner. It's not a decorative addendum to DRHP. It's not annexure number 3. It's actually the soul. It's the soul of the story that you will tell to investors. So that's my opening thoughts. I'm happy to take any question that anyone may have, and I'll react to that.
Yeah, I think while we are on this topic, Payal has actually dropped in a couple very interesting questions, right? And I'll address each of these one by one, right? So Payal asked that does the ESG or BRSR report is it a required file when you go from the DRHP to IPO process, right? Yes, no. And again, if yes, then at what stage does the company need to file BRSR?
So let me take the second question first. The stage is very important. Let's not talk about BRSR right now. Let's talk about, as per our DRHP, when do we start preparing audited results? So it requires 2 years of audited results to be published as part of DRHP. And my personal belief is, as you start looking into your, so Payal, I can see is 3 years. So as you walk that path, as you start preparing for your financial reporting, management reporting journey, that's the right time when you start thinking about your ESG journey. Please, I'll differentiate between BRSR and ESG journey. So our experience in Oren has shown that it is not what a company is not doing that pulls our score down. It is what a company is doing very well, but is not reporting, or is not documenting, or is not converting into policies that many a times pulls our scores down. So the ESG journey should start in a structured manner when we start our journey for financial due diligence, when we become ready for our audit processes, governance processes. Uh, Take time to mature. It's not an overnight thing for a small startup to start thinking about planet climate issues may be too overwhelming. But some of the issues like local regulation, law of the land, uh, we spoke about child labor, gender issues. These are the things which, if we start building early enough and make that as a part of our both internal company policies, and then have a reporting and a mechanism to record, so that when we hit the IPO stage with our final DRHP document, there is sufficient data there. So DRHP does not ask your intent. It asks for what is being done, and it asks for data points. So my answer, short answer is now start as soon as you start your financial processing of the reporting requirements. Start slow. Start with what you do very well, what you are committed to, like CSR. Uh, Many of the startups may not be profitable and hence may not be required to do regulatory CSR of 2%. But is there an intent that you want your employees to do volunteering? Even if that is reported, that goes a long way to build your story in long term. So start early, but start slow.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Abhirup would also love to hear your thoughts on the same.
Yeah, so I'll maybe like first of all talk about what is the difference between ESG and BRSR. Like if I have to explain in a layman terms, BRSR is nothing but basically a question paper or maybe like an examination that we give at the end of the let's say year that we are there, right? Whereas ESG is nothing but the course that we are studying. So it takes like an entire year to kind of pass our annual exam, right? So it is exactly like that. So BRSR is nothing but this basically a report card or question paper that we are submitting, but it needs years to kind of make sure that yeah, we are prepared for that examination and we are going to excel for that, right? So that's where, as Rajesh sir mentioned, that it can take 1 year, 6 months to maybe like a couple of years, 3 to 4 years for any company. And because of our experience of working with multiple companies who are like listed and they got into this BRSR journey because of the new regulation coming in, or maybe even companies who are going through that IPO process in the last couple of years who were our clients as well, we have seen that it takes at least 1 or 1.5 years to kind of regularize and establish that mechanism in the company or organization, so that we are at least being ready to publish the report in format of a BRSR, right? Now, as you mentioned, as Rajesh sir also mentioned, that it is not an annexure or a like binding requirement of DRHP. But then, like what we have seen working with companies who are going through their IPO process is that this is something that companies do have in their like road shows as well as investor documentation, which essentially keeps that, yeah, like we as a company are doing our risk management and due diligence process very effectively, and at the same time we do have our ambitions and like environmental and social goals and targets also in the picture. So it's not a part of DRSP, but then yeah, definitely you do need to have, or like companies do have this in their road shows, investor presentations, and all of these things there.
Perfect, perfect. Thank you. And Ravi, I hope that answers your question as well, right? So I'll just kind of summarize what was said by both the panelists, right? So and again, this is also I think something that Payal has highlighted again. So BRSR is mandated only for the top 1,000 listed companies in the country, right? Number one. Number two, right? The regulator might not mandate the whole BRSR reporting for you today, right? But basis our experience, right? We work with a ton of companies and we've helped them through their journey, right? Just like how Abhirup said and Rajesh said, that as companies go do their roadshows, do the fundraising with their investors, right? They are being compared to these publicly listed companies that are doing their BRSR, right? Number one. Number two, right, you of course will be talking to investors in India. You will also be talking to investors outside, right? Today, sustainability, ESG is an extremely, extremely important topic, right? It's a great way to differentiate yourself. It's a great way to represent yourself as a more mature, as a more sustainable, as a company that's run with higher governance principles, right? Even a small company like ours, right? Like at Oren also, Abhirup has been working tirelessly to prepare our sustainability report, right? And that is because we get asked this question from our global customers, right? So I can only imagine what it's like for larger organizations as you, right? So while it is not mandatory, it is not a tick in the box exercise. It really, really is something that stakeholders such as investors, banks, right, are kind of looking at when they look at you as a company. I hope the three of us have answered your questions here. Now, I'm talking about ESG integration, right? Like, okay, today, if you are an organization that is on day zero, right, there is nothing called ESG at your organization. And what we see is that the burden of implementing ESG, anything ESG, falls on the shoulders of the company secretary, right? And again, you of course have a lot on your plate already, right, when it comes to this entire DRHP to IPO journey. And then there is this other piece of thinking about, okay, what we as an organization, yes, yes, what we as an organization can do when it comes to ESG, right? So what we've tried to do is kind of create some phases, right? We can also think of certain quick wins, right, on how we can start thinking about ESG at the company, right? The first phase is for us to think about what is relevant to us, right? ESG is a very, very broad topic, right? In today's conversation as well, there are people from across multiple different types of industries, right? So the ESG topics, and by ESG topics, I mean, you can think about it like GHG emissions, water management, waste management, plastic management, supply chain sustainability, employee well-being is important to everyone. No one can deny that, right? Certain governance parameters, right? So these are all ESG topics, right? So the list of ESG topics relevant to Oren as an organization versus to each of your companies will be different, right? I'll give you an example, right? We could have a manufacturing company here. Water management is a very important topic to you and not to a technology company like ours, right? Data security. Today, data security is important to everyone. But for a tech company like ours, that is the prime element of our business, right? So it's a lot more important to us. We have to make sure we're on top of Saudi compliance, Europe compliance, et cetera, because there's a lot of data calculations flowing through our systems, right? That might not be the most relevant to that manufacturing company, right? So materiality assessment is the process of determining which are the key ESG issues that are relevant to your industry and your business, right? The size and scale of your business, the geographical locations where you have operations, all of that comes into consideration. A great way to do that is to do a gap analysis, right? It's a very easy thing, right? You could go to Google, see what your listed peers in India globally are doing when it comes to sustainability. You will definitely find, just do like a command F, look for the word material topics or materiality assessment. And then you will be able to very easily find what kind of topics they are talking about and reporting on, right? Of course, once you do this assessment, there's also a way to engage your stakeholders. Stakeholders being internal, external stakeholders. Internal are our employees, top management. External are our suppliers, customers, bankers, etc. On how do they prioritize these topics as well, right? Then we can focus on, okay, once we have these list of topics, we can think about how this kind of correlates with the company's mission, vision. We can start creating policies pertaining to each of these, right? We can also start doing the data collection, right? Always, whenever you think about collecting data when it comes to an ESG report, right, you always have to do it for the entire financial year, right? Which is again 1st of April to 31st of March. Right. And again, I think like how just for financial data, you need to publish it for the last 3 years. If you do want to do an ESG report in the BRSR format, there are certain data points that require you to publish data for the last 2 years or 3 years as well. So and that's why when Rajesh said that, yes, we need to start looking at data collection much in advance and not last minute. That's why I found myself nodding at that comment, because same. Even sustainability requires you to have these metrics in place, right? And not only metrics, like over time, there is an expectation that, like I'll give you an example that for you as an organization, greenhouse gas emissions accounting becomes very important, right? How many, what are the GHG emissions or greenhouse gas emissions your organization is generating, right? And I mean, if you look at your listed peers, you will almost most definitely see that most of them will have like a net zero goal, right? I'm sure net zero is something you might have seen in your day-to-day as well now, right? Like Amazon is doing it, your favorite car is doing it. We have net zero cars, net zero ATMs these days, right? So it's that, right? So there's also an expectation that all of those material topics that you've identified for yourself, you also have like a goal, right? On you improve your performance on an annual basis on those metrics. You can think of it like your financial metrics. Like on a year now, as a listed company, everyone's watching that revenue number, that margin number, that sales number. How are you improving it? Like, and if you don't do it, or the media goes crazy, oh, these guys have not done that, right? I think sustainability is something like that as well. Once you publish a number, you have to kind of show that how you improve it on an annual basis, right? And of course, right, like on an annual basis, report has to be created. There's always, what we recommend is that, yes, eventually get into a process of doing like a third party assurance on that report as well, right? And yeah, we also recommend that you have to train a lot of your stakeholders on those topics as well, right? Like, and I think sustainability is such a thing, right? And I think Payal said yes when I said that company secretaries have to bear most of the burden on this, right? Like while company secretaries or even sustainability teams are the ones who are most responsible for this, they actually, those poor folks don't really own any data, right? All of your sustainability data is coming from the HR team, coming from the operations team, EHS team, legal team, finance team, right? So it's a lot of back and forth, and that's why we recommend just conducting training sessions, awareness sessions, so that they're also aligned in terms of what to call it, what not to call it, so on and so forth, right? We'll share this entire deck with you. I think we're kind of running short of time, so I'll just kind of move past some of these things. We have 10 minutes to go. I'll take another pause. Are there any questions? Yeah, I think there are no questions. Perfect. No, Ravi has a question. I'm so sorry. For Indian MNCs, which framework is better to use for reporting? Before I move on, Abhiroop, do you want to take this question? For Indian MNCs, which framework is better to use? Yeah.
Yeah, so to answer your question, Ravi, as I mentioned, BRSR, or the framework that SEBI prescribes, it's a India-specific framework. So any stakeholder, any client, any customer, or any value chain partner that you have in India, for them, BRSR will be much more relevant because they are familiar with that. But then other than this, if you have your operations primarily in Europe or maybe in USA, based on that, like the framework also changes, like the primary framework. But then if I have to recommend one single framework which can suffice the need of multiple geographies and every other country altogether, in that case, it will be GRI, which stands for Global Reporting Initiative. So that is the most acceptable framework today. Like if you look at the sustainability reports published by all the companies out in the world, in that case, 60 to 70% of the companies do use GRI as a primary framework. So if I have to recommend one, it will be GRI, which you can use to use your systematic reporting disclosures.
Perfect. Thank you, Ravi. Hope that answers your question. Feel free to send across a follow-up in case it didn't. I'll also pick up on what are some key challenges that we see out there. Right. Number one is just the complexity of ESG integration as a whole, right? There are, again, lots of different people working on creating or like centralizing this ESG data, maybe creating that ESG report. Lots of KPIs that have to be determined. Sometimes thinking about which is the right ESG topic for me, right? KPI in that topic becomes a challenge, right? Again, it's a it requires a lot of collaboration, right? So even that resource allocation sometimes gets easy. You need a lot of data from your EHS manager, but your EHS manager is not necessarily going to get paid extra to do this extra work that you've just sent their way, and they're not going to be happy about it, right? So many times, just like onboarding your various team members and supporting you in this activity is one challenge that we see, right? Beyond that, it's a lot of data, right? Lots of, like, what we've seen is that about 80% of ESG data sits outside the head office, right? If you're a manufacturing company, if you're an industrial company, all of it kind of sits in your different location, different plants, and across different departments, right? So lots of data challenges in bringing that together, right? You need to kind of talk to lots of existing systems that you have, lots of Excel sheets, so on and so forth. Organizational resistance, already said, right? There has to be a shift in terms of thought process, right? And you also need leadership commitment, right? I think so many times you've seen that, like, a message going down from the top, from the top down, right? On why this is very important for the organization, and now we kind of have that lens. It becomes very, very important as well, right? Sometimes you are kind of going there, reaching out to folks to collect this data, but there isn't that commitment at the top, right? You do not have that urgency created in the organization. And last but not the least is just regulatory market pressures, folks, right? Like, I think we work with we work with certain large publicly listed companies, right? And at the end of the financial year, some of them have to create like 10 to 15 different ESG disclosures, right? One is, of course, a BRSR. I'm giving an example of a publicly listed company. In addition to that, they have their different customers requiring different ESG disclosures. Their customers send them these Excel sheets. There are banks today, right, that tend to do ESG due diligence as well. So they're getting all of these Excel sheets, right? So it's not only one single report, it just ends up being so many of these other disclosures or reports as well, right? So the scope of work just keeps on increasing in that regard, right? And again, that's why we kind of built our platform to unify and solve all of these challenges, right? We tend to work, we take all of this off your plate and then handle it on your behalf. Everything end to end we manage. We talk to your HSC person, we convince them on why this is important. We talk to we train your top management, your board on the importance, show them the long-term picture, and kind of support you as well. Before I move on, Saket has a question. And again, Abhi, because you're a sustainability and data guy, right? Can you take this one?
Yeah. So, Saket, you're asking that what is the role of ESG in AC, frizz, DG, and vehicles, right? So, I believe you would just try to understand that how these things are relevant from an ESG lens. So, if my understanding is correct, so see, like from an ESG viewpoint, if I have to narrow down that where this AC, frizz, DG, or vehicles comes into picture, this is only one topic which is called as your carbon emissions. So today, as you all and like we have been hearing about climate change and global warming and all of these things, that also results from basically the carbon emissions that we have in the atmosphere, right? So every kind of energy that we consume has carbon emissions until unless it's renewable energy, right? So that's where, like, if you see that why we are pushing for, let's say, solar or wind or any kind of renewable energy as an option, that is because those kind of energy don't have a carbon emission associated with that. For everything else, like your DG uses diesel, your freezer or maybe like AC, anything that we are using today, where we are consuming power from the grid, which is not 100% solar or 100% wind or 100% hydro. For that, because the power plants consume coal to produce that electricity, that also associates a carbon emission there, right? So that's where all of these activities combine together to one topic, which is called as your carbon emissions. And that is what you measure and report to public disclosure, saying that for my organization, because I have so many factories, so many plants, so many warehouses, so many offices, which consume this much electricity, this much fuel, this much of, let's say, refrigerant gases like that we have in AC and fizz, because those refrigerant gases, which are anyway ozone depleting gases, and then like those gases also have carbon emission associated with that. So essentially what you are trying to get to is a single number which shows, yeah, all of these activities combined to a total carbon emission of my organization, which accounts to these many tons, right? And that is what we or any investors or any other stakeholder is going to track, that is your company reducing the carbon emission year on year or not. So that is what is the single KPI that comes into picture. And for that single number, you need all of these data points, how many liters of diesel have been consumed in, let's say, a DG versus your some vehicle which is there and all. Okay, you are asking how to calculate this. So there is a process around it. Again, like if I have to explain about this carbon emission calculation, it can take a entire week to do that, because again, like,
And
because
if I may interject, Abhirup, actually, Saket, we're happy to set up a one-on-one between you and Abhirup regarding this, right? Because same, it's a fairly long topic, right? We've conducted webinars in the past. Yeah, perfect. So Rasadul, can you pick this up and help set up a one-on-one between Abhirup and Saket? We just have very little time left as well. I'm so sorry, Saket. I hope you understand. Thank you so much. I actually have another question here. Is that and Rajesh, maybe you can answer this, right? That someone here says that I understand everything that you're saying, right? But how do I convince my management, right? How do I get them on board on something like this? And what is the right time to kind of do it?
See, let's who's management and who's responsible is a very broad question. First of all, in the earlier question, we spoke about that only top 1,000 companies have to do it, but there are now boards. And if I take my example, every board I sit on, I insist that ESG journey starts, whether that's a startup board or a non requirement for BRSR board. So boards are becoming very conscious that even if it's not regulatory requirement, the company should start this path, and the CEO is in the boardroom. So I don't think it's very difficult these days for the top management, the founders, the CEOs to really appreciate the need and the demand for these requirements. However, there are different priorities. The core business risk sometimes takes priority over any other risk. And ESG tends to measure risk which are slightly distant from our day-to-day life in many, many ways. So my one line answer is, if I have to speak to my boss, I will tell that boss, we are chasing capital which is becoming very conscious. We are chasing conscious capital. We are dealing with employees who are very socially conscious, who are demanding what kind of practices do we have and what kind of a culture do we have. At the same time, we are dealing with regulator who has data across the companies, across the country, for us not to do a good practice or a good reporting because it does not apply to me, may not cut ice with the regulators for too long. Even if I am a 1500 company, but I'm not doing certain good practices, that may be a rap on my knuckles or from my immediate regulator. May not be from SEBI, but if I am an insurance company, IRDA may ask me that question. If I'm a bank, RBI may ask that question from me. So I think basic principle is, and you use that word material, start material, maybe not massive. And the moment you make it material, everybody understands. People sometimes get overwhelmed by the size of it, but the materiality brings a business sense into the entire approach and then the questioning of why should we do it.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I mean, while we have you, right, and another question for you, right, and again, Russell, I mean, Abhirab would love to hear your thoughts after this as well, right? So today, the kind of people we have are company secretaries and compliance officers, right? Some advice for them in terms of how does their role evolve as it starts including ESG, right? And I mean, are there any skill sets in addition to their role that they should be thinking about, right? Is something that I'd love to hear your thoughts on. Before you go, right? So folks, this webinar was scheduled only for 1 hour. If you can stay back, we will continue for another 10 minutes, right? If you have to go, we completely understand and we'll send over the recording your way, right? But we're going to just continue the conversation for another 10 minutes.
So again, Arushi, I'll respond to your question from our history of capital business, our history of industries and globally and India also. I presume I am the eldest in this whole forum. 30 years back, the head of audit used to be somebody who's done business but no longer wants to be in the field and wants a corporate job. 20 years back, the role of CRO, even in banks, was not very well defined role. Today, CRO sits next to the CEO in any financial institute. The dealing with treasury earlier was not a defined skill set or defined expectation that a company would have. Look at today in every company. We got professionals who have been trained. My sense is today, I think we are at the beginning of the journey, but things are moving very fast. Our partners in ESG side on the companies, be they be company secretaries or ESG professionals, need to move very, very, very fast. It's a leadership space which is evolving. It's going to open huge opportunities for people who know the subject better than the others. And then there is also requirement of partners, people like people who understand technology, people who understand data. AI is going to make a huge difference. So my sense is we are going to see some very smart leaders in next 5 years coming from ESG background. And it's good that people start preparing as early as possible.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Abhirup, any comments from your end?
No, so I completely agree with Rajesh sir that whatever he mentioned, that it has to be a journey and everyone should upskill on this, because there is no single yardstick or single course or single certification that essentially entitles anyone that they are an expert on ESG. That's where it has an evolving journey for anyone. And that way, like if I have to recommend something about basics, you can just start with understanding of just a framework like a BRSR, what exactly it is, and then understanding just the environmental parameters, which are like this carbon emissions and maybe like how you do carbon emission accounting and all. This should be the basic around it, and then kind of just moving around how regulations are changing from different country to country. Because if you are an organization who has like customers spread across multiple regions, multiple countries, like Arushi mentioned that like client has to report on multiple such disclosure requirements by the clients and by the geography requirement. So that essentially should be the starting point for anyone. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you so much. I have another question in the chat that I believe someone here heard the word ESG committee when it, when they were in discussion. I mean, I think they heard it from their top management. So they're just wondering, what is an ESG committee? What is the role of an ESG committee? What is the purpose of an ESG committee? I'd love to hear thoughts from both of you.
So if you the governance structure in the country are defined primarily by Companies Act. Companies Act prescribes certain committees which are mandatory. Audit committee, nomination and remuneration committee, stakeholder committee, and maybe one more. However, the evolved companies, and again, if I go back to 2020, there was only 2 companies in India who decided that they will not deal with the subject of ESG under any other committee, but started their separate ESG committee. That meant the board members met only to discuss ESG and its progress in the company. The first company was Infosys. And then today, if you just Google, out of the top 100, maybe 70 companies will have a separate ESG committee. So ESG committee is nothing but a committee of the board members which look into your ESG approach, philosophy, strategy, implementation, and progress. It is like your audit committee or a nomination and remuneration committee or risk management committee. The way we have a regulatory. My sense is very soon, like CSR committee is regulatorily mandated. So my sense is CSR will increase its scope and ESG will subsume the CSR in its own scope.
I'm sorry. Perfect. I was on mute. Yeah. Perfect. Thank you so much. And what kind of people should be? I mean, when we're formulating this committee, right? Like, how do we think about bringing people together for it?
See, board committees are only from board, nobody from outside. So the committee necessarily will have to be board members. However, your question is valid. Like today for audit committee, we make sure that there is at least a CA who can be head of audit committee. Very soon time will come, and it's already there. When we start asking, when we deal with the companies and they ask us that what kind of a board member my company will require, people will say, no, hey, we need an ESG expert also on the board. But it has to be a board member. Simple question is, there may be invitees. There may be people the management people who will be invited, but the committee necessarily will be constituted from the board members. Minimum 3 members of the board will make a ESG committee.
Got it. And I think one more question, like this is actually my question, right? Like for I think communication is a very important part when it comes to ESG, right? And external communication is one thing, so many times internal communication and alignment is also as important, if not more. Right. And something that I've seen Abhirup talk about a lot as he goes about his implementation, right? The message you send to the board of directors, to the top management, to the mid management, and to the actual implementation employees is very different, right? Sometimes it has to be longer term view, shorter term view, right? So could you also talk to us a little bit about, give us advice that when we're talking to each of these stakeholder groups, right, what kind of message should we be giving when it comes to sustainability or ESG?
So in one word, the answer is each of these initiatives are becoming impact driven. What is the impact of the activities that we are doing? Let me take one classic example of CSR in India. Some time back, each company will say, hey, let's do education. Without even assessing whether in that area, in that geography, or in the environment, education is really a need, or the efforts of a company can fulfill the education requirement. Uh, but today, the boards are asking, hey, why are you doing education? Why are you not going for poverty eradication? Why are not you going for water scarcity problems? And some companies are even asking about why don't we go for sports? Jindal is a classic example who spend most of their money on making Olympic winners. So largest money from CSR for Olympic efforts today goes from Jindal, which is a CS, because they want to see impact which is measurable. So this I've given a CSR example. Similarly, in case you take for social, if you take for environment, if you take for risk management, instead of talking about activities, boards, employees, and regulator also very soon will start asking about, okay, you did well, what did it result into? So, and that's where Abhirup keeps on talking about. End of the day, data is God. You may have हजार stories to tell, but what data does it represent on your BRSR or GRI is very, very important.
Got it. Perfect. Yeah, I think we're on time. Thank you so much, Rajesh. Thank you so much, Abhirup. Thank you so much, Rasadul. This was amazing. This was incredible. And thank you so much, especially all of you participants for joining us and sticking with us for this extended time as well. We honestly had a lovely time. Thank you so much, Payal, Sake, for your questions also. And again, we will be sending out emails with the presentation, with the recording, right? And in case, we'd love it. We'd love to talk to you about your specific use case as well, right? In case you'd like to book time on Abhirup's calendar, we'll send his calendar link to you, right? And he's a busy guy, right? So might not happen tomorrow, but will happen eventually in November itself, right? But yes, thank you so much, everyone.